Quite often in Greek mythology, Hades is mistaken as the god of death, and though it is something that he would naturally deal with being the rule of the underworld, it is the primordial deity known as Thanatos who is death personified. Thanatos doesn't play a huge part in Greek mythology, but he was amongst the first generation of gods to exist, his mother being Nyx and his father Erebus, night and darkness. Like many of the primordial beings, they are quite often thought to represent concepts rather than taking physical form, Thanatos of course representing the concept of death. But with that being said, Thanatos is somewhat of an exception. He can be seen making a few rare appearances in early Greek artwork, often appearing as a man in a dark cloak with wings, sometimes even wielding a scythe, a figure that resembles what we consider today to be the Grim Reaper, or perhaps a dark and fallen angel. When deities are associated with death, it's quite normal for them to be assumed as evil. Death is something that we ultimately cannot avoid, and the fear of the inevitable is why these figures become somewhat demonized. But as is the case with the majority of these deities, Thanatos included, they are far from evil. Thanatos himself was thought to be the spirit of non-violent death, known for his gentle touch, similar to that of his brother, Hypnos, the primordial deity of sleep. It was Thanatos' sisters, the Keres, who were the primordial spirits of slaughter and disease, often seen as bloodthirsty and haunting figures. Thanatos' remaining siblings were just as powerful. Eris, the goddess of strife, Nemesis, the goddess of retribution, Aparte, the goddess of deception, and Charon, the boatman of the underworld. When performing his duties, much like Hades, Thanatos was unbiased and indiscriminate, which meant he was hated by both men and gods, as in Thanatos' eyes death could not be bargained with. He was merciless with those whose time had come to an end, but his touch of death was quick and painless. Death may have been considered as unavoidable, especially for mortals, but there are a few occasions where individuals manage to outsmart Thanatos and essentially cheat death for a brief period of time. The king Sisyphus was a figure known for his guile and trickery, but having betrayed the gods, he was punished by Zeus. Thanatos was ordered to take the king to the underworld and chain him there, as his time amongst the living had come to an end. When the two eventually reached the underworld, the king asked Thanatos if he could demonstrate how the chains would work. Thanatos was merciful enough to grant the king this one last request, but Sisyphus seized the opportunity, trapping Thanatos in his own chains and escaping death. With Thanatos bound in the underworld, no one on earth could die, and this particularly angered the god Ares. What good was a war if his opponents could not die? And so he intervened, travelling to the underworld, freeing Thanatos and handing over King Sisyphus in the process. This story does show us that Thanatos is by no means evil. He displays compassion towards the king, which does in turn lead to him being tricked, and we can potentially view this compassion as either a strength or weakness. Thanatos did also have a brief confrontation with the hero Heracles. When he was asked to bring the princess known as Alcestis to the underworld, Heracles fought the god of death, eventually driving him away. During the Trojan War, Thanatos was summoned to return the body of the demigod known as Sarpedon, whose father Zeus wanted his son's body to be taken to his native land of Lycia. Sarpedon was an ally to the Trojans and fought fiercely until the last year of the war, when he would be killed by Patroclus. Despite being responsible for engineering the war, Zeus lamented his son's death, and he could not let his son's body be disgraced on the battlefield. He ordered the god Apollo to retrieve his son's body, and once Apollo had done so, he would then give the body to Thanatos and Hypnos, who would take the body to Lycia and give Sarpedon the hero's burial he deserved. Thanatos of course accepted this task, but not because it had been given to him by Zeus, but because honouring death was his solemn duty. In the later eras, the transition of life to death in the Elysian fields was seen as a more appealing option than before, and with this came a change in Thanatos' appearance. He was now seen as an extremely beautiful god, similar to that of Eros and the other winged gods of Greek mythology. During this period of time, there were a number of different depictions of Thanatos. In some, he was seen as an infant sleeping in the arms of his mother, Nyx, and in others he could be seen carrying upside-down torches, symbolizing a life that had been extinguished. I personally have a great deal of respect for deities like Thanatos, who perform these thankless roles. They often go unnoticed, and when people do eventually pay attention, they're very quick to demonize them without much thought at all. Thanatos was known for his gentle touch, and his embrace was almost welcomed, unlike some of his sisters. The form of death that followed was quick and painless. Thanatos is a god I'd compare to Hades, who's quite often mistakenly associated with the Christian devil, leading people to believe that he must be evil. There are those who would compare Thanatos to the Grim Reaper, and though Thanatos may have been one of the many influences of the Grim Reaper, they are most certainly not the same person. There is no glory in what Thanatos and the other deities associated with death do, but the role they perform is crucial in maintaining the cycle of life and death. I hope you guys enjoyed taking a look at another one of the lesser mentioned deities in Greek mythology. If you did and you have any thoughts on Thanatos, then please let me know in the comments below. But as always, I've been your host, Mythology and Fiction Explained.